Threat modeling stuff is what I'm going to be talking to you about today, and how we fold that into risk, which is kind of the center of what we do, but we do a few other things around that. A show of hands first. How many of you work like in security? Like security is part of your job title? Sort of 5.5. And how many of you in development? Roughly speaking, the rest of you. Okay, that's helpful for pitching it. So, actually, a little bit about me before I waffle on into the content. So, people say, when did you start in cyber? I started in cyber as a teenager. Some of you might know what that means. So I was a hacker, and not of the ethical variety. And then the best thing that happened to me was getting caught when I was about to take my A levels and got faced with a choice of kind of going the dark side or joining the blue team, joining the light side. Decided to stay straight, and then went into sort of software development for quite a long time. So I've done my time in development, and I feel your pain, and as I was saying to Malcolm earlier, and went on to run projects and stuff, all sort of secure apps, all in the secure space, secure government, and kind of companies that have a particular security thing. And then for the last 5 years, I've been independent, running this business, consulting to different companies. Mostly in the cloud, mostly in AWS, but increasingly getting involved with clients who are either hybrid or are dealing with other clouds, multi-cloud and Kubernetes and things like that. So yeah, great to be teaming up with Control Plane on that front, and just being able to be here and speak at your event. Thank you very much. So a bit of context about security. None of you will be surprised to hear me say that security is hard. Security is hard, and it's getting harder. Often when we build a system, or we come in and we're trying to do the security for a system or for a business, often, or for a business process, we want it to be like the picture on the left, where it's nice and clean and all our ducks are lined up in a row, and we have nice clean processes, and our traffic is where it's going to be, and we know what the risks are, and we know what the threats are, and they're all kept under control. And often it's more like on the right, where we have legacy systems. We have like projects where the business tried to move into the cloud, and then they had to back out, and maybe they've got some hybrid stuff they can't really get rid of, and we've got legacy technology, we've got old processes, we've got some challenging stuff around security, risks that won't go away, and so on. And when I did a presentation not long ago to a load of folk in the banking industry, where I pulled up a thing called DVI. I don't know if you've heard of the Developer Velocity Index. It was something that McKinsey came up with, which is like a measure of the speed of development, essentially. And they had a sector by sector breakdown, of which banking was one of the higher ones, where the pace of development it was basically increasing. So while we're trying to secure the systems that we've got in front of us today, and companies are operating today, managing the risks that we have today, apps are already being built for tomorrow, and they're being built faster and faster. And obviously cloud and SaaS, IaaS, PaaS, and all the other things around us enable that to be happening at a higher and higher speed, and by a wider and wider variety of people and disciplines. So the challenge is kind of not static at all. These two graphs. So the graph on the left is breach costs. So it's average cost in millions of a data breach. And I should have pulled out a different graph, actually. IBM published a report not long ago talking about the average cost of a data breach, again broken down by sector, where it had a much more clear trajectory upwards. And on the right, you've got global cyber spending. Now, this is taken from a research outfit, and obviously all stats can be twisted, so I'm not going to lean on these stats too much, but there's a clear trajectory there, useful for seeing trends. And you can see that cyber spending is exploding, and yet we're not really yet getting on top of, in this case, breach costs. Obviously, breaches are only one kind of security incident, but I think it goes to show that from my experience and from where I'm standing, we're not quite hitting the nail on the head yet as an industry. We're doing some great things. We've got some great tools, and we just need to find the formula that starts to turn the tables on the attackers a bit more, I think. And this is one of the problems why. One of the reasons why is ThreatPlane has a variety of customers, some of whom are really small and some of whom are really large. When we walk into the larger customers and I say, so tell me about your tech stack today, I get presented with a diagram that looks a bit like this. Some of you might recognize this. I've just pulled this off the CNCF website. This is their landscape. But I kid you not, I had a client, now a client who I know very well. And when I first started working with them, their diagram was at least as complicated as this. And it had like a nice figure of 8 kind of process of how they managed their SDLC and stuff. But there were so many tools and they were just security tools. I mean, this is CNCF, this is the whole landscape, but they had just security tools and they were struggling with security. So one of the issues we've got is just a plethora of tools that the buyers, I think, don't always understand how to leverage properly. It's not that the tools aren't good, it's that the complexity of the task means that leveraging them properly is bad. On the other end of the scale, we have this. So some of our customers are startups who are pre-revenue. They are building their app and they don't have the foggiest about security and they don't mind admitting it. And they just don't know where to start because, again, there are numerous risks. They just don't know where to start. So all of which is to say that I think we've got a challenge, and ThreatPlane is kind of here to try and address this challenge, which is how we divvy up security and how we align security. So on the left, we have a technology-focused security story, which I think ultimately leads to this. Now, we all know that cybersecurity is about technology ultimately. I'm not trying to deny that, by the way, but it's the internet after all. But there is inevitably a business aspect. The risks that we're talking about, the data that we're talking about, the customers, the employees, the other stakeholders we're talking about ultimately are interacting with a business or with an organization. And on the right, the business cares about business outcomes. So what I find in my experience, and I dare say some of you will agree, that you have two units in the business. You have the wider business, which is trying to go in a particular direction. It's chasing the market, it's chasing its customers, it's trying to build features, it's doing what the investors say, whatever else. And you have a security team who is also trying to, batten down the hatches, is trying to react to things as they come along. They're usually communicated at the last minute, all these challenges, and you end up with paths that are just divergent. And you end up with teams that in the longer term are working against each other, and it creates unnecessary tension. And it creates, even down to the language that we use can be a barrier because the business doesn't understand what we're talking about, and we don't understand necessarily what the business is talking about because we are kind of worlds apart. And obviously, the follow-on diagram is to try and unify the two, to try and unify the arrows. And you'll notice that I've drawn the security arrow as a bit more divergent than the business one. And I think this is well, there'll be Q&A after. You can quiz me and challenge me on this. But I believe probably that we've got more of a job in security to do to follow where the business is going, however challenging that might be, to help them understand the value that we bring to the table ultimately, and to help them protect against the risks that they suffer from. So this slide just summarizes all the stuff I've just said, really. So I think that the industry is moving and needs to move from a technology focus to a risk focused. And in some corners of the industry, that's quite a new concept. For some of you, that might be old hat. You've been doing that for years. I'm finding a mix of the two. So this is where I think we need to go to try and really make security more effective for the businesses that we work in and for. And that then allows them to make the right decisions to then gain the upper hand on the attackers. And into this, we talk about threat modeling. So threat modeling is not new. That's the first thing to say, is that threat modeling has been around for quite a long time. It was, the man who wrote the book on threat modeling is a guy called Adam Shostak, who used to work for Microsoft, who's written a brilliant book called Threat Modeling, on threat modeling. And if you're interested in this topic, I can give you a link after and stuff like that. And threat modeling is, as I interpret it and as we use it now when we do threat modeling for customers, is as a communication and a collaboration tool primarily. So what we're trying to do is discover, threats, but really what we're trying to discover is risks, as you'll see in a minute. communicate those in a standard and understandable way to other stakeholders, and collaborate with them to then address those risks. Easier said than done. And there are three kind of big ingredients that make up threat models: threats and controls. Threats being the things that obviously face your system, your attack surface, and the things that your threat actor may do. Controls that may mitigate the risk of those threats occurring or may enable you to detect them, that sort of thing. And in the middle, the unifying factor is risk. And what we find is that even with companies that have already done threat modeling, is that risk tends to be the missing variable. I was involved in a large cloud transformation program before ThreatPlane moved into threat modeling, and the threat modeling, big part of their governance process. We did some huge threat models, some real monsters. And I could immediately see the value. I was new to it at the time. I could immediately see the value of, yeah, this approach works. But we ended up without if you imagine this slide without the risk piece in the middle, we had a load of technical stuff on the left about what attackers could do, and we had a load of technical stuff on the right about what we should do to prevent it. So we had a huge list of threats, a huge list of controls, very large list of controls, because it was a large system, and not enough budget to do all the work they needed doing. So how do we prioritize? Well, to prioritize, we need to talk to the people who are making decisions, who have the budgets. What do they understand? Not the language of threats and controls, which is where risk comes in, where it needs to come in. And nowadays, where do we use threat models? Where can you use threat models? Wherever there's risk, wherever the security gremlins lie. Some of you are nodding, so this won't be new at all. You can threat model a new system, you can threat model an existing system, you can do it in its entirety, or you can just zoom in on a particular part, threat model that, and then work iteratively to work out your coverage of threat modeling coverage to an entire system. Works very well with agile workflows. And what we're also seeing is opportunities to threat model things that aren't technical. So threat modeling a business process, threat modeling processes where you're sending data perhaps between other partners and third parties. I have yet to threat model an LLM, but I'm waiting for our first gig doing that, because there are obviously some interesting threats around large language models and AI in general in particular. So threat models to me are really versatile because they can be used in such a flexible way. And we've done a load of work with development teams of many sizes in all of these different contexts, where we are either doing greenfield or brownfield stuff, where we're either zooming in on particular features against a larger system that's in situ, or we're doing a full ground up assessment. And sometimes it's apps, sometimes it's platforms, and so on. So I'm, as you can tell, quite enthusiastic about this. The other thing about threat models is just the way that they can unify other stuff together. So with, in organizations where there are strong compliance requirements, obviously you usually have a compliance team that's helping the organization address that. If you're in a bank or a healthcare organization, are our two kind of main examples where there are some compliance things to get done. And what we've tended to find is that threat modeling actually really helps bridge the gap between the compliance team and who are working in the business and your technical folk who are running and building infrastructure and building applications, because you can, again, where we phrase it in terms of business risks, it just allows for a common language, and it just means that the output of the threat model is actually understandable to these teams. And where you can get to is a point where actually the threat model becomes the part of the compliance process, and you don't have lots of ad hoc meetings having to satisfy compliance folk about stuff that you've already done, about Terraform code you've already written to handle whatever controls. So yeah, it kind of is useful as a corpus of knowledge to feed into other processes. It usually doesn't fully to address compliance requirements, but it does, in my experience, go a fair way to helping grease the wheels there. I've already talked about their flexibility. They're flexible to produce, and they can evolve as the systems evolve. So when we do threat models, we'll advise that you try and keep them up to date. So I'm going to delve a little bit into threat models. I don't think we've got time to actually do one together. I've based this presentation on a workshop that I do with another group regularly, and we do actually delve into like a WordPress and sort of do some threat modeling together. We haven't quite got time for that, but I mean, if you're interested, I'll link you to that book later, but you can come and chat to me after. You know, we do a load of stuff with some customers around training engineering teams to leverage threat modeling to like harness it for their own use. So if you're interested in any of that stuff and just how to approach threat modeling, then you know, I'm very happy to. I mean, you won't shut me up, so you know. Sorry, the basic components of a threat model are this. You obviously scope out your system, so what you're going to threat model. Really important to get this right. So important to get this right. The number of times we'll have a threat model, but the scope will be unclear, which means we know exactly what the risks are. We just don't know what the system is, so we have no idea whether actually we need to, you know, reassess any of it. Like I've encountered that scenario so many times, and it unfortunately really saps the whole thing of value. So really important to define your scope, whatever it is. We usually work with just, you know, AWS architecture diagrams as my usual scope, and that is usually sufficient. And then threats and controls. And then, as you saw, you can also include risk, which we always do, and particularly business risks. So we'll always phrase risk in terms of business risk, because I think that's how you need to do it. But you can also include all this other stuff. So we're doing some work with one customer at the moment to integrate our threat modeling into NIST 853. It's natural that when you put controls on a threat model, you then track what the status of those controls are. So it's pretty standard practice to, you know, you'll list out, you know, say, for example, you have an attacker who, so you have a threat that an attacker could change a file in an S3 bucket. So a natural control for that would be, let's put a policy on that bucket to stop the attacker doing that. So you might then link to a ticket, which is create an IAM policy, stick it on the bucket, you just track it in a ticket. So it's natural to follow that stuff with control status, and it obviously becomes very easy then to derive risk from that. We've also got some customers who are exploring linking it up with CTI, so threat intel, with inherent residual risk positions, and then with use cases, which is a big one for us. So when I say use cases, I mean monitoring and alerting. Really, really important and often missed in things like threat modeling exercises is that the exercise is not just a preventative exercise. So if you have a system with a whole load of threats against it, you will probably never be able to fully prevent all of those threats from occurring. And of course, the threat landscape is moving all the time. So kind of by definition, you won't be able to prevent it all. But just as important is being able to detect an attack occurring in the first place, whether or not you've sufficiently mitigated it. So so to take that S3 bucket example, an attacker writes a file to an S3 bucket, we may have a preventative control in there that prevents that, but we'll still advise the client to put, you know, if the risk justifies it, put some kind of alert in there for it anyway, just in case the control fails. So we do a lot of stuff with that. And the real power of threat modeling, I think this is the, you know, you want threat modeling manifesto, this is it, this slide here. Well, I mean, it could be touched up a bit, right? But where you really want to get to, where a CIO or a CISO wants to get to, is where is my risk? What they want to know is, I've got a limited security budget, how do I deploy it? I've got limited risks which I need to communicate to my board, where are they? And we've got a vendor saying to us, they've got this solution, how many things can I knock off with that solution? And for that, I think the real power of threat modeling comes with being able to step back and look at your whole technology estate, whether it's AWS and custom apps, or whether it's just a, you know, like a SAP system or a, you know, or whatever, deployment or whatever, and being able to say, right, this is where these are where our risks go to. And remember, this stuff is rooted in business risks. This is not, this is not just about technology tools flagging up technology risks, which may or may not relate directly to the business. This is about business risk, stuff that resonates immediately with senior people in the business, because this is also the stuff that they care about. So this is, I think, the real power of threat modeling, and this is kind of what we're working towards with our customers. So with some of them we've done, you know, tens and tens of threat models, and they're now in a position where they can get that picture, where they can start to make actually quite strategic decisions about security in knowledge of the facts around risk. So I'm going to step through the process a little bit with what time I have left, and just talk about how we create one. There's loads more resources I can point you to afterwards, but threat modeling comes in a few varieties. if you follow him at all and you've heard of Adam Shostak and you follow him, you may well have heard him say that you can threat model in as little as 5 minutes, which is absolutely true. So when I say book a 60, 90-minute session to start, what we tend to find with our typical engagement is, you've got a team who's already built or at least already designed a system of some sort, and they're trying to figure out, how are we doing? Like, have we got any big gaps? So it usually needs a bit of time just to sit down with them, work out what it is, what they're trying to do, and what controls they've already got in place. So we usually say, bring in some technical folk, some engineering folk, bring in a threat modeler, someone to just mainly facilitate the discussion, and drive it towards the right things that matter. And then ideally you'd have business users there as well, because they understand the business risks aspects. You can do it asynchronously, but it's much easier done in the room. Becomes really important where you're dealing with data, for example, being sent between users or sent to third parties, where the business risk aspects are usually fairly opaque when you're developing the system, but can be very apparent to the business users. So here is my 6-step process for creating a threat model. These slides, I think we can share them all afterwards, I think, can't we, Sam? So don't feel you have to copy all this down. I can share all this afterwards. So 6 steps. Number 1 is scope, as I said already, really important to handle your scope. Just get a good handle on whatever it is that you're threat modeling, and importantly, what's out of scope. Our kind of watchword, my kind of watchword, because my brain is of limited size mainly, as simple as possible and as complex as necessary. So start with blobs in a box. And if you really have to, start including some of the color and some of the detail of what you've built. But we stray away from that as much as possible unless it becomes relevant to the risks or relevant to the threat model itself. And then number 2 is to explore data. So particularly what data you're handling, if any. With some systems, it's just about compute. It's just about providing a service. There's not really any data that we need to worry about. But in the main, you're handling some kind of data that you just need to be careful of. It's got some kind of implication if it gets changed without your knowledge, or if it gets breached. And then third, the kind of the sort of threat actor, and really we're talking about not specifically is it APT 28 or the APT 29. What we're talking about is the sophistication level of your adversary. How motivated are they going to be to attack your system, if at all? And who are they? Are they nation state, organized crime, insiders? Are they accidental insiders, which is an increasingly, I was going to say popular one, it's an increasingly common one, where users, make mistakes, and that leads to a security incident. We try to include that in our threat modeling as well. And then the last 4 steps are just about working through the process for the threat model itself. So we brainstorm our threats using Stride, and I'll talk about Stride in a minute. And then separately to those, we come up with controls, and there's a degree of separation, which is really important there. And then we repeat. So what we tend to do with the repetition is we always say to clients, roughly refresh your threat models every 3 months, or every 6 months, or when your system changes, and it usually lands on roughly every 3 months for some of the ones we've been dealing with recently anyway. Ideally, when you repeat a threat modeling exercise, it's actually fairly low effort. That's the idea. So if the system hasn't changed, then it's actually quite low effort. But it is important you go through that so you can detect changes. So Stride is a categorization method. Who's heard of Stride? Some of you, surely. Yeah, most of you. Okay. So for most of you, this won't be new. So Stride is a way of categorizing attacks, and I think there's a debate out there about whether it categorizes every kind of attack. In my experience, it sort of does if you're a little bit creative with the words, but it's a really helpful guide just for making sure you covered all the key vectors of attack on a particular component in a system, or a particular user in a system. So spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege. So spoofing is about spoofing someone, i.e. stealing an identity, so pretending to be someone else, or pretending to be another machine, or pretending to be another IAM role, something like that. If the domain includes it, we'd extend that to include things like phishing attacks, some social engineering attacks, that sort of thing. Tampering is tampering with information, so either on the wire or at rest. An attacker goes and changes your database underneath you, goes and writes to your S3 bucket outside of your application. What do you do? Nicks your USB stick, changes all your files and then puts it back in without you knowing. What do you do? Repudiation is an interesting one. It's all about auditing, logging. So repudiation is strictly defined as the ability for an attacker, for the ability for someone to do something and then claim they haven't, or for someone to not do something and then claim they have. But we extend that usually to include attacks on our logging and auditing systems, logging and auditing process. Information disclosure, as the name would suggest, is a breach of confidential information. So where an attacker can read information that they shouldn't have access to, which may not just be PII. Of course, it might be an attacker can do a recon on your system and work out where all your open ports are and things like that. Denial of service is any denial or degradation of service which might pose a business risk. And elevation of privilege, which Adam Shostak lovingly calls the queen of threats, the queen of stride categories, tends to always have a high level of risk attached to it, and is usually associated with someone gaining an elevated privilege through vulnerability or misconfiguration, and then being able to conduct most of the other categories of attack because of their elevated privileges. So elevation of privilege is usually a hot one for most threat models. So those are on the threat side, and what we do when we threat model is we just iterate through all the components in the model, focusing on those ones which we know are most relevant to the business risks we've got in front of us. And we iterate through the applicable stride categories. And every component in the model, again, I apologize that I haven't got a diagram in front of, actually, I lie. Actually, we do have, if I hit stop here, I do have a dummy diagram, which I used here. Yeah, brilliant. Okay. So for example, if we took this scope, we would iterate through all of the items in this diagram here on the right. And typically in a threat model, all of your items in your diagram fall into 4 categories. So you have actors, users typically. You have a process, which is any kind of process. So it could be an application server, but it could be just anything which is taking an input, providing an output, and/or. So it could be a batch job, it could be a script, it could be part of your business process where just some data is being transformed. So that is a process. It's operating on something. You have a data store, so anything which stores data, fairly self-explanatory databases, S3 buckets, file shares, that sort of thing. And then the arrows are data flows. And those are your 4 categories of things in data model, in your threat model, sorry. So from there, you can, even without knowing all the details about tech stack underneath, you can start to reason about, right, where are the risks going to be? What sort of threat would the attacker pose? What sort of controls would be put in place? It's not my alarm, is it? Fair enough. So when we're building a threat model, we sort of iterate through those components one by one, and we build a table of threats. And let's go back to the beginning, isn't it? And after that, we move to controls. And controls are just a way of, as I said before, mitigating your threats. So typically, for every threat, you would have the threat the attacker does X, it impersonates an actor. Here's the stride category, here's the component of the system we found it against, and then we would list a set of controls that we could put in place, and it's could is the key word at this point. It's a shopping list of controls that we could do to mitigate that threat occurring or mitigate its damage. So quite a lot of our work is done in blast radius management, and quite a lot of the controls, therefore, we focus on are finding and reducing that blast radius. But there's also detection, which is really important. So if you find any threats where there is a high degree of risk, we always are looking for how can we detect that in the first place. Sometimes really hard to do, particularly at the application level, and work with that, and then also response. So some of you may well have worked with responsive controls, self-healing systems, that sort of thing. That might be where we think about this sort of thing, but most of the time we're going to be aiming for preventative controls if we can. And the beauty of controls is that it's a blank canvas. So if we have a risk given rise to by a threat, the controls is our collective, remember we've got engineers, a threat modeler, and business users in the room. We can think of anything we can think of to reduce that risk, whether it's to detect, prevent, or to just merely to reduce the blast radius by mitigating it. And it's easy to move to technical only controls at this point, to think immediately about configuring cloud resources to do something stupid, something clever but perhaps stupid. to think about technical, fairly elaborate technical solutions to a problem, when sometimes actually there's a simple thing you can do in the business to make sure the data that isn't there in the first place or anything like that. So the controls are a blank canvas; they don't have to be technical. Oh yeah, and one other thing is at the bottom here, do try to capture controls already in place as well. So part of threat modeling is communication and collaboration and discovery, as we said. And part of that, the communication piece, is to communicate the security posture we already have. So it's really important just to try and capture how much risk you've already mitigated, because the chances are you've already done a load of work to mitigate risk. As we said before, you could add a load of other stuff into the threat model, but that's kind of all there is. That's all there is to it, really. So a few key principles, and then I'm going to stop talking and let other speaker take the stage. Simplicity is always key in threat models, I find. It is a communications tool, so we want to be really simple and clear in the language you use, and by linking it back to risks, some of that is work done for us, but the way that we scope the threat model, the way that we design it, should be as simple as possible. We are using it to communicate, so it's important to reflect that in the language that we use, and to keep things clear. And then lastly, to keep it up to date. A threat model gets steadily more worthless and starts to become dangerous after a while if it's not kept up to date, because it can become a bit of a false sense of security when perhaps things have actually moved on. So I hope that was helpful. I'm sorry that we haven't had a chance to do a practical demo, but I think probably my time is more or less up, I think. So thank you for bearing with me. And all my details are here. Jonny Tyers on LinkedIn. Feel free to just look me up and add me. I'll accept all the connection requests. And yeah, if you're interested, you want to find out more, get in touch with me afterwards. As I say, we do run training for teams who are who are interested in exploring this further. So if you want to talk about any of that, or you just want some pointers on how you want to get started personally, I'm very happy to get you plugged into all that. So thank you very much. That's right. My pleasure.
That was another quick hand for Jonny. That was brilliant. We're going to do a quick Q&A if anyone has any questions. Because always it comes up. There's always questions. So we're just waiting to see if we can get the microphone working. Bear with us one second. Okay, we can start the Q&A. Jonny, if you could just repeat.
Yeah, I'll repeat. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm quite happy to repeat questions.
We'll try and do it organised. For any immediate questions, we'll go gentleman in front. Have to go near, please.
Yeah, first of all, I came in a bit late, but I really like what I saw. I'm just curious, it's like, I feel like when I hear about technology, there's like a lot of like talk about formal models, like tribes, things like that. And the one thing that I keep coming back to is like, how do you actually prioritize these like threats?
Yeah, great question.
How formal is that usually? How much is it like?
Yeah, so the question was around threat models have a lot of detail in them. How do we prioritize the threats? Yeah. I mean, exactly. So this is why we've mixed in business risk. So when we produce a threat model, we link every threat at the end to the outstanding business risk. So we say, right, we've got a threat. We've got a list of threats and different components in our system. The system will have a colorful picture as far as risk goes. Often, you'll have some parts where the data is being handled, some parts where actually it's not that important, some parts where it's very important because it's authentication or whatever. And the business risk then becomes your guide to exactly how to, so that's as formal as we get. And there are two aspects to it. Number one is, how high is the risk? And, we have, every business tends to have their own established methodology for measuring risk. They usually have, if they're old enough, they usually have an impact matrix, which will define this is what a critical risk looks like to us. This is what a medium, this is what a low looks like to us. Or they might have a more comprehensive scoring system. Most of them do not, but some do. But also another aspect of that is risk tolerance. So, you might highlight a high risk, fine. But where are we aiming? Are we aiming to get it down to a really low risk, just lower than high? like is a medium all right. So working out what a business's, what they're willing to tolerate in terms of outstanding risk is quite an important factor. And that's usually where kind of, stakeholder engagement, particularly senior folk comes in. And it's why it's quite important to work out exactly what the risk is, so you're very clear on what the answer, what question you're asking in the first place. But business risk as an overall guide is how you do that. I think without risk there, it becomes very difficult to really prioritize a threat model, because it basically comes down to an argument between different points of view about which threats might be more important, which components might be more important, which controls we should ought to get in anyway because it's cheap to do or whatever. Business risk is firmly the favorite there. So, thank you.
Other questions? Gentleman behind.
Hey. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So the question is around how do we threat model front ends? I mean, it's a fair question. We usually focus on, the back end, and because typically you're submitting data to a back end, you're doing some processing, sending it back. If you've got an application which is purely front end, quite a lot of your controls are by implication outsourced to the browser already. So, if you're using local storage, for example, you're relying on the controls around that local storage, which the browser will enforce for you to make sure that other domains can't access the same local storage. Some of it, I mean, it still has value, I think. So we've done a few threat modeling engagements with that sort of scenario in mind, where most of it is front end based. Some of it gives rises to risk around, maybe you need to train your users more, or you need to make sure that the browser is kept up to date, for example, is an obvious one. Vulnerabilities always play a part in threat models. And an attacker being able to exploit a browser vulnerability in the JavaScript engine or something would be kind of an obvious factor there. I mean, it's fair to say that generally the level of risk is lower, but it all depends on the particulars. You mentioned IP addresses and stuff, for example. Obviously, yeah. More on the business side. So is your question more whether to include the front end in the threat model in the first place? Is that what you're getting towards? Yeah. I mean, it's a good question, and it applies to other threat models as well, where if when you build up a library of threat models, a similar situation sort of comes together, where if you have different cloud components fitting together to form a larger system, you may threat model one component when you build it, and you may get it right down to like a really low level of risk. And you might go over here and you've got this component here, which is talking to that one. You might actually find that you do the threat modeling exercise to sort of discover the threats. You may then find actually the business risks aren't actually that large because we've already done all the work down here, and that may well apply in a front end scenario as well. So just because we're threat modeling, it's discovery first, do the work for controls afterwards if the risk justifies it. So if you do the threat modeling and you discover actually, as we have done, actually the threat modeling engagement where it was, very front end heavy was exactly this. It was actually, there isn't really much to address here. You could do some controls work, but it won't actually move the needle on risk. We wouldn't recommend you go any further. But you've got the threat model, so you've got the backup to say, you've got the evidence to say, yep, we've done the work. We know that the risk is mitigated. We know what the risks are, and we've got somewhere to start from if we ever need to refresh that. So, talk to me afterwards if you want to go into more detail. But yeah, that would be my sort of general suggestion. Yeah.
Michael.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you get to a general cloud platform level, so the question was around how do you maintain, a secure controls position, make sure the controls don't fail, maintain a secure configuration. Um, I mean, at a yeah, I mean, as I said before, we would encourage detective controls where you can for where the risk justifies it. So we try to minimize detections as much as possible. Security teams already get enough noise. So, we only ever sort of ask customers to put in detective stuff for stuff that really matters. But those scenarios are partly that, because also, of course, an attacker may go after your controls. If they elevate privileges or get control of a dev account that can change an S3 bucket policy, then they may just remove it and then they can go and cause havoc. I mean, my other recommendations would be, high level platform stuff. So think of things like AWS config, cloud custodian, those sorts of tools where, and there are many more, where, you're kind of watching things. I mean, when we've worked with customers where they have larger sort of platforms, larger deployments, we'll usually end up with an umbrella effect of threat models where you might threat model the application, then you might threat model, things like the account that the application sits in to capture like stuff that isn't directly related to the application, but things like the roles you define in the account, maybe, the VPCs you've got defined, if you've got a VPN back to the corporate so that you can do some, things that may not strictly fall under another threat model. At the top of that tree, typically you would have like an AWS wide threat model, which is where we look at things like SCPs, like if you've got transit gateway, VPC, those sorts of things. And that would be the level, and like organizational cloud trail, that would be where we're starting to say, right, what if an attacker is, in a general sense, trying to disrupt AWS configuration and controls? That would be and then we do the equivalent for the other cloud platforms. Obviously, it's a slightly different challenge when you get on-prem or if you go hybrid, but for the cloud, that's where we'd start.
Okay, I think we are out of time for that talk now. So final round of applause for Jonny.
Thank you, folks.
Absolutely brilliant in-depth insight into threat modeling, and we'll pass over to our next speaker.
Yes. And those of you online, we're going to go on a 2-second break just to plug over. So we will be back with you in a second. And now I'm going to do this fancy thing where I change over. And now you can see what it looks like when we... we can go back on. Cool. So thanks everyone online. Next we'll be joined by Ellie. And I won't speak more than I have to because you weren't here to see me. So I'll hand it over. Thank you again. Cool. Everyone online, we'll be back in a second. We put the break back up. Don't worry, I don't actually. Yes, but now what? And we're back.
Thank you, Sam. Um, 1 second. You see me well? Right. Hi, everyone. I'm Ellie. First of all, thank you all for coming and attending. A lot of friends have messaged me and supported me, so I'm very thankful. And in particular, two people, Audrey, who empowered me to do this talk, and Robin, who jumped in quickly to review this with me. Today, I'm going to talk about something that I am very excited about. It's something very basic. It's going to be a really wide talk, but it's going to be very focused to one particular idea. You're going to look at it, you're going to be like, is this all? And I'll be like, yes, this is it. It's not rocket science. It's just we need to weave, so it has to always be happening. Um, so let's get into who I'm not, which Sam wrote about me. I'm not a great chef. And some of my greatest achievements pertain to chicken sushi, which is when I came here, I was playing around with the oven and the oven didn't function properly, and I got out with chicken sushi, which is, they were still slightly raw. And I thought maybe the chicken in the UK was different because that's when I moved here. And then the second one happened on Sunday. We tested my house smoke detectors. If I cough right now, it's because of that. My throat has been slightly damaged because of it, but we're doing much better. Um, Again, fun is the keyword here. I like to cook for the fun of it. I usually go out hungry. We order pizzas. Everyone's happy. We go from there. Who I am? I'm someone who cares about the AppSec industry. I've been part of it for more than 5 years now, but these 5 years are different from the regular. I've really involved myself in almost every aspect of the AppSec industry. And in particular, I have been project leader over 3 projects, and I have co-authored one with Spiros, who's with us in the crowd, and Rob, who's a wonderful person. I'm a technical editor for Alice and Bob Learn Application Security, which is an AppSec book written by Tanya. And then I am a status quo challenger. This is what I'm doing here, basically. I'm trying to speak a different version of what AppSec looks like. Because I feel with everything happening, with how fast we're growing as an industry, we're kind of losing touch with what we actually are. I go to the gym. Might not look like it, but I do. And some friends say about me that I'm innocently, brutally honest. Um, I will usually stand up anytime you talk to me. I'll be like, why are you talking like this? And just ram at you. Who is this talk for? This is for everyone. It's a really wide audience in my eyes. If you're a techie, I want you to learn about us. I want you to see how you can see more about us and work with us better. If you're a manager, I want you, or a leader, I want you to lead us, to enable us, to help us join whatever you're working on, and challenge us. Because sometimes we will bring something to your engineering team and you'll be like, well, this doesn't suit me. This doesn't suit my team. How can we change it? And then we'll go back to the drawing board and do something better. So do that. If you're none of those, well, I hope you learn a bit about us, because I'm going to cover a lot of ground in this talk. So I can just get to that endpoint. Where am I heading with this? So I hope I can deliver this message to you. So how does the talk look like? We're going to start with an AppSec story. What is AppSec about? What's its current presence? How did it grow? And then its strategic potential. This isn't a complete guide. Don't go out there and quote me for every word I've said. It's more of a blueprint. I wanted to take this and actually build on top of it. I wanted to be comfortable looking at it and saying, oh, this is easy, this is simple. I'm going to use it. I'm going to draw different lines. And, oh, this works for me. This doesn't. And this is based on opinions and experiences. I have not done scientific research. I'm not in a master's degree. I'm not in a PhD. It's me. So what this talk is not about, do not expect me to teach you how to sell AppSec to an organization. That is a whole different talk of its own. I cannot sell AppSec as an idea to an organization that doesn't speak it from this talk. But potentially you can take something from it and start applying it as a security team, different conversation. So the why of today. Why are we here? Why did I decide to take the stage? So I've been looking around in our industry and I'm like, well, great. What are we debating? What are we fighting for? What are we challenging? Where's our focus going ahead? And what is AppSec anymore at this stage? Is it actually ProdSec? I'm not sure. But I've seen people talk about this, like application security or product security, and there's small nuances. And I get it. In the department or in an organization, it's important to identify what each of them represents. But if I have already an AppSec team or a ProdSec team, whatever you want to call it, that is not my concern. I really don't care about that. I want the how do I actually make my company secure? And this doesn't answer any of those. It just helps me to market my team, which is great. And there's a lot of discussions like this. We have a lot of time on our hands nowadays. I don't like it. So what is AppSec? In my eyes, what does AppSec mean? So in the marketing version, you will see always like 3 number of pillars, the 3 pillars that identify AppSec, the 5, the 6 pillars. Just write down AppSec pillars on Google and you will find 17 versions of it. Well, it's mostly marketing is what I want to say. And the actual main target of this is we want to produce increasingly robust applications. And you notice here I say robust, not secure, not because there's a big difference, but because robust is more easy to take. If a building is not robust, then it's not secure by design. Like if a fire goes off and, oh, we can't get out of it. Yeah, are we really secure? But it's robust. It can handle the fire. It can lead us out. It can take care of us. So it's robust. I want to look at it from that perspective. How robust are we as an application? And AppSec's main identity is how can we make our applications, our products for ProdSec teams more robust. What are AppSec pillars? I have joked about it, but what are they? Well, is it technical? Is it a technical pillar? Is it infrastructure? Is it a framework? Is it tooling? Is it data? Is it cultural? Are we talking training? Are we talking processes? How do engineering work with security? How does security work with itself? It doesn't matter. You choose your own pillars to drive a strategy, which you can probably build from a maturity program. You go ahead and you see, this is where I stand on my AppSec program. Great, this is what I need. These are the main pillars that will push me forward. This is my vision. Great, these are 5 pillars I need. These are 17 pillars I need. Let's go with it. There are 2 main frameworks, SAM and BSIM. They will help you figure that out. What about our jargon? I think all industries love it, but we in security love it a bit more. We have DevSecOps, we have shifting left, we have secure by design, and the most newest, coolest kids in the hood are shifting everywhere and shift smart. So what are all of these? I'm gonna touch on them lightly. I'm not gonna go deep into them, but let's declassify them. DevSecOps came when DevOps was coming out, and it built on top of it. It was like, DevOps is now the big hype. DevOps is developers' operations mixing together so that we can deploy faster. We can have this channel between developers and releasing their product faster to whatever we wanted to release and integrate everything. So we came around and said, oh, but you guys aren't doing security. And it's a very important component of your stuff. So we're going to use DevSecOps till you start saying DevOps and do security internally. That never happened. So that still exists. Second was shift left. It built on the software development lifecycle. If someone doesn't know it, it's basically from requirements, what do you want to build, to releasing it to the public. And it's shifting left, going from this is in the public cloud, and then here, this is the requirements phase. We're starting off from a product, a new product. So we want to shift to the start. We want to take it from the start with them. We don't want to do, as Jonny was saying, oh, we are releasing this product here, take it. Can you do something about it? And we only have a week. Yeah, good luck. Secure by design, it's a shift left mentality. It came on top of SDLC and was like SSDLC, which is secure software development lifecycle. We start from the start, secure by design, and then we go all the way up. And then something was lost in translation. Marketing and tool providers decided to say, hey, shift left, take our product. Or some companies decided to take it by the ear and be like, shift left and forget the right. So like they stopped testing, they stopped operational, and they're like, we only do threat models now. And that's not good because we need to cover all of it. And then there's something called now shift smart, which is risk-based. It's a shift everywhere methodology. These 2 have come out in the last a year and 2. They really focus on what is the priority for the business, and then from that you start shifting your focus. So should I focus on the requirements? This is where the biggest problem is happening. We go there, and then they shifted the SDLC based on that. Growth of AppSec. I'm not gonna cover everything. I'm not gonna put a timeline with dates and all of that. That's too boring for 7:30. What's the time? Yeah, that's too boring for now. There's a talk and there's a blog that discuss application security, how it grew, where it is now, or a year ago, because they were released in the past year. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do something lighter. I'm gonna go through simple steps that define, in my opinion, AppSec as it is now, bit by bit. Again, this is a personal review, not a scientifically backed thing. First of all, security started to become a thing in the corporate world. Before it was in the corporate, it was people hacking things, and people in the hood just gathering around and be like, "Oh, we're gonna pass by this house and we're gonna hack it and go from there." Security was really simple back then, but at the same time, technology was simple. People were starting to get a hand up. And then it started to happen that corporate world needed security. Standards were coming out. Then thick clients and web apps were widespread. They started to take the internet like this. And security was not ready for it. So security needed to adapt and grow. And then OWASP happened in 2001. It started to grow. W was for web. Now it's not for web anymore because AppSec is about everything nowadays. It's not just the web. It was created early 2000. And then from there, it's still the biggest organization that works in the AppSec industry. And then in the engineering side of things, agile activity started to challenge waterfall. Waterfall is when we delivered a product at the end, like we gave the requirements and we were like, in 6 months, we'll meet again, give us the product, goodbye. And what happened is engineering felt like, no, we need to talk more. We guys aren't in sync. So agile started to happen, activity started to challenge waterfall, people became more communicative. After that, DevOps came around. We started to see challenges. We started to see, we want to release faster. We want to build faster. We want to share whatever we have developed faster for everyone. Previously, it was IT that did most of this. But then the cloud's slightly growing. How we release things slightly changed. We have pipelines. We have a huge amount of automation that happens. IT was not ready for it. DevOps slightly came in. And then this is where our first objective came in. We are starting to search for an enabler security. And that was AppSec's big first objective. It wasn't AppSec's big first objective, it was security, but that translated into AppSec. Because security is always looked at as a gatekeeper, and it still is. Now, if you go and talk to someone who's never interacted with an AppSec engineer, they'll be like, oh, they sent me an email to reset my password or to throw whatever I have gotten from the streets. Why did you plug a USB into your laptop? Those were the conversations. Or if you were releasing a product, they'll be like, no, you can't. Why? They don't have an answer for you because they don't know what you're building. Then tool growth happened. We're talking WAFs improved. They're not the best, but previously, before WAF, we had a firewall that used to cover the whole network. So whether you had an application, whether you had whatever you had, a firewall. And that wasn't enough. It didn't understand HTTP. It didn't understand the request. It didn't understand any of the threats that were pertaining to it. And then DAST, which is dynamic testing, which kind of tries to mimic an attacker attacking your website. And then we had weird SAST. I say weird SAST because SAST isn't easy. It's not easy to code scan. Understanding how the code functions, how the classes link together, and where a certain business logic is going to show up, that was hard. And SAST was mostly like a marketing gig. They wouldn't identify plenty except for very simple things. Now they're better, but back in the days, that was weird. And then DevSecOps and shift left happened. And this is the last point on this slide, but on the next slide, there's more. But I stopped at this one because this is, I think, where the biggest growth happened. These two enabled us to really say, AppSec is here. Listen to us, talk to us, we exist. And this gave us massive growth across several pillars. I'm going to touch on them lightly, but there's a lot of information in this. First of all is AppSec programs and maturity levels. AppSec teams now wanted to see where are we against everyone else? Are we doing good? Should we invest more? Do we need to focus on requirements, on design, on testing, on operations? Where should we focus? AppSec teams existed now, but they don't know where to calibrate themselves. Mapping of standards. This is a project Pierce is working on. It's called OpenCRE. And it's basically a language, a single language, as Jonny was talking about. Having one language for people to talk is very important. And what this does is it communicates between requirements to design, to testing, to code development. It allows you to give one ID and gives you everything else. So this is very important. It's now being worked on, but this is very important to how AppSec is able to communicate with the pen testers, with the people threat modeling, with the project manager who's building requirements. How do you put it in a story? Well, just link the ID, and the ID will help everyone else. Risk discussions and analysis. In the past year, I have seen a big boom in risk. We always spoke about CVSS. We had version 3.1. I didn't look for how long that was, but everyone hated CVSS 3.1 because it didn't give enough context, but everyone used it regardless. And then now this year, CVSS 4 came out. It added a lot of context to it. It added this security issue that you're seeing here is not just this. It has a lot more. So it might be, maybe it was a critical based on the CIA triad, but now it's completely different because it's internal, it's locked in, no one can access it, no one can reach it. What's the risk? There's no risk, no one can reach it. It's probably a low, but it's not your biggest priority. So going back to the question you're asking on how do you set risks or how do you prioritize things? Well, you need the context to see where the risk is happening. And then EPSS, I'm not going to delve too deep into it, but it helps you find the predictability of a certain issue. How much is this issue going to actually happen? It came out, I think, a year ago. Next is application security posture management. This allows you to see everything in one pane. It allows you to see all of your vulnerabilities, your risks, everything in one piece. And then management can look at it and say, oh, this is where we need to focus. And you have the combination of, oh, this project is failing from a design perspective, but on the release side, it's all secured. Oh, good, they're doing a good job once we have the conversation with them. Some people don't have anything at the start. Right, let's focus there. Supply chain security. I think from 2020, I think it just exploded with every big breach that has happened since 2020 has partially been related to supply chain, whether we like it or not. And the two biggest components for it are SBOMs, which is like an inventory management for the whatever libraries you call into your product or your cloud or everything you use will have to be in an SBOM. It's like your contract. It's like we have X, Y, and Z. This is the version. This is what we think it contains. Good. This is the tree. And then SCA is the tool that consumes it, and it has its own vulnerability database management to say like, oh, this version of this library has a problem. And in the past years, they have been growing tremendously. And then at the end, we have threat modeling, which is kind of being marketed as a silver bullet for everything. But it happens that we have some problems with it. We're going to get to that. But one good thing about this, as Jonny said, that threat modeling has existed from the early 2000s, but never was used. And we actually can use it in everyday life, like crossing the street or whatever. Threat modeling is part of us as humans. We just never cared about it. So, and very simple, AppSec is growing exponentially, especially in the past couple of years. Because if you go back to this slide on its own happened in kind of like 4 years, while everything you've seen before has taken like 15 years. So the growth has been very strong here. And I think it's very important that we tackle this in this talk. So since everything looks so good, since we have this growth happening, what are the challenges here? This caricature, I've loved it since I started in the industry. It existed before I have existed, I think, because this problem is always there. You only have one security engineer, and you have 17 tools, and you have 500 teams, and you have a whole organization. Poor Dave, man. I feel sorry for him every time I look at this. And the challenges really resolve around a couple of bits. One of them is scaling, which we're going to tackle in this talk. Second is tooling's burnout. When you have, as Jonny said, people now usually have like 100 tools that feed into one specific spot, and you're like, right, what do I do about all of this? That is tooling's burnout. I can't handle all of the income. Sorry. I can handle all the income. Integration challenges. We're talking here security with security, because AppSec is different from security in a slight manner. Each one has a vision, but they coincide in certain areas. You have AppSec and engineering, which is the biggest and most interesting challenge for all of us. The third one is AppSec with SMEs, subject matter experts. So here we're talking product, we're talking QA, we're talking business. Why are they the SMEs? Because our focus, first and foremost, is how do we make a secure product, and the one who built it are engineers. So engineering is our main focus, and then everything around it is a subject matter expert, how I look at it. Because they can create their own features, they can create their own things, but a QA person cannot build the feature and then test it. It's the other way around. So, scale challenges. Who's ready for it? I'm gonna start first with describing the several challenges we have right now in terms of scale, what people have tried to rely on, what they've tried to see at least. And the first one is the old ways challenges. How did old ways do it? How did old security do it? Point in time activities. It was like, oh, the engineering team has a release in October. We need to do a pen test and get a compliance check on this. Great, great. And then every year you do the same, and then you get the same exact report with the same exact vulnerabilities without anything being touched, because it's just a point in time activity. No one cares about it because they've only invested in it this amount of time. You can think about it as well, security through compliance. We need to be PCI DSS compliant. Great, we do that, and then we don't speak about security ever again. Perfect. The second one is AppSec teams try to go into a consultancy form, or they hire consultants, either or. And this kind of is good, but at the same time, it has its challenges. First one is the human disconnect. You disconnect from the day-to-day concerns. If I don't talk to someone every other day, they're gonna look at me and be like, I don't feel like talking to you about what is happening with me. You ask me about this, I'm gonna give you this. Take this and leave me alone. You don't have the time for me. It's just human nature, or how things are used to. Second is heavy reliance on structure. Once we go into consultancy, our time becomes precious. We can't do whatever we want with whoever we want. If you need to talk to us, you need to follow this flow that is complicated. And then when engineers looking at it and be like, yeah, I'll only message them when I have an urge to do that. Like I am needed to do that. Otherwise, I will avoid them. Third one is planned communication. Based on those two examples, communication is no longer someone popped in my DM, sent me a random message about, oh, this is happening. This doesn't happen anymore. It becomes more of, oh, he scheduled a call with me in 2 months' time. That'll be nice. Yeah. Fourth, it's advice becomes slightly detached. A security engineer comes and sees, oh, this is a feature they're building. Great. And then gives them advice. But then engineering was looking for a different type of advice, because engineering has been building this whole set, and you're looking at it from a very small window that you can't visualize everything. It becomes really hard. And then this leads us to knowledge depth. When you become a consultant, you're elevated. You're not part of what is going on the ground. You don't have the proper human connection, and you don't have the technology connection anymore because you're a consultant now. And you can't actually stay on top of this when you're working with 15 teams, let's say. Each team has their own version, have their own framework, have their own product. And every product is different. It's hard to stay on top of every product because engineering do it for a living. Imagine you trying to come in 1 week, oh, this looks good, and then go away. That is impossible. Engineers get paid for a reason. And then at the end, what happens is a culture shift, because companies with time grow, and the people that did the proper AppSec has left, and the new teams that weren't onboarded with friends don't know really how security works. It's just a process now. So a whole huge culture shift happens in here without us noticing. Everything becomes disconnected. Right. This is where we start talking about threat modeling. People look at threat modeling as like, this is the silver bullet. This is going to fix my problems. And it's on the tongue of every CISO, every AppSec leader. It's slightly funny, but it's great. From one side, it's great because it is being marketed like never before. People are now pulling, how do we build tools? How do we make better threat models? And I'm going to mention now the challenges, not to discourage it. We're going to talk about how to enable threat modeling later, but it still has challenges at this current time. First one is forgotten models. This is documentation. Threat models are a documentation piece. Some people have tried to include it within the code. So threat modeling as a code, you can find it. There's basically 1 or 2 tools at best. Models get forgotten really fast. They get outdated really fast because they are, if you look at it, they're a point in time activity. We're back to that problem. 2, threat models have a huge cost because how people look at it, they're like, right, we need to set 3 sessions, each session an hour. We need to go over all of this, and we need to cover all of this within this time. And as Jonny mentioned, you have several things to look at. You have to look at the threats, you have to look at the risks, and you have to look at the controls. And when all of this is done, how do you prioritize them? Because threat models generate a lot of threats. Because it's all, you're just trying to think before something happens. If I tell you, oh, I'm going out on the streets, you can think of 17 things that might happen to me before I reach the street. So imagine that in a very complex model. Lack of expertise. Threat models existed for a long while, but they weren't picked up till recently. People are usually scared of them. They're like, I don't know how to threat model. It's scary. I have to work with engineers. I have to look the act. How do I do it? Like, I don't have the knowledge for it. And there's very small trainings around it and a very handful of books. So it's growing, but it's still in a growth stage. And then you have to write the training and the guides for your internal teams. How do we do threat modeling? How is it done in our company? And if you want to do it, how can you do it? So you have your internal training as well for the people that will do it. And then at the end of the day, it's standalone in most of the situations. You do a threat model, you don't link it to requirements, you don't link it to pen tests, you don't look at it again. It just is thrown somewhere, which is not good. Next is security champion. I love them. My favorite thing in this industry is security champions, but people or industries usually implement them in a weird way, and they have their challenges. First of all is you need to be consistent and you need to be able to build a community. Because if you're not consistent, this person's going to look at you and be like, oh, we meet. Oh, we meet occasionally. We don't know when we meet. We don't know what we meet about. We don't have someone that is pushing us to learn something, to do something. It becomes fragile and they don't care about it. We are at work at the end of the day. We want to be doing something that benefits us, that gives us joy. And if you're not consistent, if you don't build this up, it doesn't work out. Second is buy-in. What we're saying here to management, please give us a certain amount of time from this engineer. It will pay back, we promise you. Yeah, how do you prove that? How do you show that? How do you get the first initial buy-in? That is not easy to do unless you already have the culture. Third is personal growth. I'm talking about a security champion's personal growth. I'm not talking about ours. Because for a security champion to be part of this program, they want to grow because this is their career. This is not your pet project. If you don't have a personal growth career for them, yeah, they're not going to stay in. 4 is competing priorities. They are an engineer at the end of the day. If a product manager comes to them and says, listen, we need to focus on this feature, a competitor is going to beat us up because of this. By design, engineering focuses on that. And that makes sense because it is business value. And security hasn't shown it yet. Strategic and tactical vision. So this is kind of important. In terms of a security champion program, a lot of people just start it and say, oh, we want to build a community of security champions. How does it grow? What is our end goal? Or what is our 1-year goal? Where are we heading? Are we just heading to have like 50 security champions? That is my goal. Perfect. That isn't really strategy. This doesn't really give confidence in the vision we're setting for a security champion program. We want to set a vision for engineering to look up to security to lean on, because security champions become our first collaborators. So what can we do? I'm going to look at it from two pieces. One as an individual contributor and the other one as a leader, because both of these are important. I'm going to say this: enable. This is the biggest word I will say today. It's to enable, on top of weave, of course. But as application security, our main job was to enable security. And at this stage, we're focused so much on technology, we have forgotten about what we were supposed to do: enable engineering to deliver secure products. We kind of failed. Not necessarily failed, but we have gone off the road. And Jonny showed us very nice lines about it. And then you might come and tell me, sometimes I'm not allowed to enable. Sometimes I have clashes. Sometimes I have misalignment, whether it's about us scaling as AppSec teams, whether we have too many tools, I don't have time to enable people, I don't have time to change how we do things, or you just don't agree with management. I'm going to tell you, just enable smartly. You might look at me and you're like, are you okay, Ellie? What does it mean to enable smartly? How does it happen? It's very simple, again. So I hope it actually feels simple to all of you. We're going to start off with a way of being. How are we as individual contributors and as leaders? This is for both. And first thing is, we need to care for our audience. Our audience as engineers, as AppSec engineers, are the engineers themselves. We need to look out for them. We need to care for them. And we're going to talk about this in a few. And then as a leader, you need to focus on your AppSec engineers, not the engineers themselves. Your focus is on your AppSec team. And then business. You need to get to a certain path where you are aligned with business to deliver the value that the business is looking for, not what security really wants. Because if security isn't aligned with business, then we have a bigger problem here. Second, it's look out for hidden teams. Hidden teams usually are subject matter experts teams. So we're talking QA, we're talking product, we're talking compliance, we're talking legal. Usually people forget about them. But when you go and poke them, they have like everything you can ask for. They will give you everything because they are left out. They want someone to talk to them, more or less. And they have the capabilities to build something with you. Especially when you look at QA. QA partially do what we do on a different scale, on a different focus. So look out for them, reach out to them, have light conversations, get to know them. Use politics for good. When you go into security, you're going to see politics is everywhere. You need buy-ins, you need a lot of that piece of where people go astray. They're like, I want to focus on myself, I want my ego, I want to grow myself, I will use everyone to do that, or I will use engineering to do that. And when you do that, that backfires on you. So I want to use the politics that you have for good. I want you to use it to build bigger programs, to fund the programs that you've started. Make decisions informed by metrics. We as security know what needs to happen, but business needs to understand what needs to happen. If you don't have the metrics, business is not going to listen to you. Engineering is not going to fund you. Everyone's going to look down at you and be like, you don't make sense. We need the metrics. At the end, build friendships, have some fun, because we're all in this together. So this is the way of being. Now, what do we do as an individual contributor on some of the challenges I have raised? The first one is security champions. First of all, it's the kickoff, because there are several stages of a security champion program. And in the first kickoff bit, I want you to experiment. I want you to see how they work, how the work can be done by itself. And you don't want to be doing a lot of changes. You want to be as smooth as you can. You have to think long term, but just start with a small brick. Like, oh, I know this developer who's slightly inclined in security. Have a small chat with them and see what they think about this feature. Maybe you'll get something out of it. And get to know them. Get to know them personally when possible. Befriend them. Become friends with them. Have casual conversations. Hey, you woke up on Thursday feeling a very good amount of energy. Oh, let me drop a message to Jimmy. I don't care. Someone. Just send a message. Be casual. Be friends with them. And ask them for their support to meet other team members. So from that person, befriend other people. It's simple. It's really simple. Just do it, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And then support them. This is very important. This is for the kickoff. I think these three words are very crucial, because once you support them, once you show that you have their back, they will trust you. They will listen to you. And when you tell them, I want to experiment with this, or I need your help with this, they will have your back in return. So these three for a kickoff are the most important. You don't need a strategy. You don't need a framework. You just need to drop a message. You just need to have a 15-minute Zoom call every now and then if you want to do it. Most people do like async. We're engineers, so a lot of people prefer to stay in their small place. So yeah. Second is expansion. Right. Now we have 5 security champions. How do we go from here? How do we expand this growth? How do we make it faster? How do we make it bigger? And this is where we start talking about collaboration. We start to blend whoever the security champions are with what we do. So I want to do a security test on this feature. Oh, I've heard that this person likes this feature in particular and want to learn how to do testing. Great, come with me. I want to do this. If you have 30 minutes, let's go over the threats, how we can look at it, how we can test it. Have brainstorming sessions. Have a conversation with them of how you're looking at it. And they might give you ideas as well. So you're not losing time on this one. Create wider meetings between sec champs. When you want to start expanding, you want to establish a foundation. How do you do that? By just having regular calls between them. This is one of the challenges I have mentioned, that you're not consistent. Just have a 30 minutes catch up, do your best, and security champions will help you have a topic to discuss most of the time. Share with them security news. Every other day, we have something blowing up somewhere. Every other day. You can just send them these and they'll tag each other. They'll have fun together. And when you find trainings, encourage them to go for it. Say, oh, you've been meaning to do this. I have found this training happening next month. Might want to go for it. And allow them to belong to a bigger organization. Because to grow in a career, you really need to belong to a lot. Because if, let's say, you want to become an architect, you can't just be a simple engineer. You really need to understand how the bigger model works, how security works, how QA works. You want to blend all of them together. And if you give them a small piece of that, you will help them grow in their career and your company. So feed their corporate growth. Make sure you feed into that, because as an employee, this is what I care about. I want to grow in my company. I want to make more money. I want to get more visibility. I want to be able to build more fun projects. And this is how it happens. So establish a community that can grow people, not just for your own numbers. Make them feel like they belong. Tooling. I'm going to start with integrating. And someone from the crowd mentioned unit tests, and this is amazing. Integrating finding through unit tests as an initial target. If you can get one of the security champions to experiment with this, we're going to go back a lot to experimenting. This is why it's so important. If you get them to experiment with unit tests, then you can start to build a certain culture of unit testing across the whole organization. Oh, we never thought about how do we test for XSS? Interesting. Let's send this vector, and then you have this library of attack vectors that QA have built for you, and suddenly engineering are using in specific functions. It just expands really fast. Second is choose tools that will integrate with your ecosystem. Don't look at a tool and, oh, this is the most spoken of. No, go find something that will fit with you. Bring an engineer with you to the demo. Ask them, what do you think about this tool? Does this work for you? Can we grow this in our industry? What can we do? And be sure to not do abrupt changes. Piece by piece. Just start simple, grow. But don't forget to grow. Because a lot of people start with something, And then they stop midway. They're like, okay, cool, we have this tool. It's not giving us anything, but we have it. We want to look for customization. We want to look for engineering friendly tools. We want to look for things that we can tweak when we need to find a specific thing in our ecosystem, because every ecosystem is different by small margins. When you take Node.js, when you take Java, when you take whatever, small bits, sometimes you write your own code that is behind the wrapper, that is behind the wrapper. Well, when you put the security scanner on it, they don't identify anything. So that is very important. And at the end, evangelize like there's no tomorrow. Why do I mention this here? Because tooling provides us with a lot of metrics. So if you can take that, if you can take teams and see how they've progressed across 2 months, across 6 months, you have an easy metric of how they're improving. Do we have more coverage? Do we have less vulnerabilities? What have we done about this? How are we tackling this? So this is very important to fund this piece. We have now threat modeling. It's going to be 2 sections as well. First one is kickoff. First piece is just start small. Forget the tools. Forget security. Forget everything you know about it. Just go have an engineering team session. Go sit with them. Have a chat. Don't think about security. Just be curious and ask them specific questions on what they're building. Engineers love to be challenged. They love to be asked interesting questions. They like conversations about their products. They like it. So converse. Just have a chat. Then when you start having these conversations, start stimulating them. I know this has different connotations, but I'm not going into that. We're focusing on how do you stimulate their curiosity? How do you get their curiosity popping into security? They love engineering. Security is part of it. They just were never thought about it in university. We just need to poke them a bit, and they will go the longer way more than we can expect. So just stimulate them on security. Let them think outside of their engineering targets. And then at the end, again, we're talking about this. Promote. Add glam to their efforts. If you're having a conversation with a developer and they mention XSS and they go the full path with you, take it, go to your manager, say, this person knows this much about security. Tell their manager good stuff. Just start the cycle. Start talking good about them. Start giving them feed into their career, and they will come back to you. And here, I'm directly showing all of them. How do you expand threat models? Threat models are rarely used to their full potential, which is where I think weaving comes in. I think weaving comes into everything, but specifically in threat models, because they're massive. They can be super big and they can be super small. You decide. But I'm going to tell you something. If you find threats, if you find risks, if you find controls, and you add to those some metadata, if you add some labels, if you add these small bits that glorify them, suddenly you have a template, and that templates create another template. So as an example, I'm using WordPress. Great, I create a first template of it. And then I start adding to it. What have we found further? And then when I come to build a new feature in my WordPress application, great, what have I already covered? What do I need for my next one? And at some point, threat modeling becomes fast. Everyone knows how to do it. The templates are there. You just take one, you add your technologies you're using. This is the specific product you're integrating within your internal company. So your products have identities now, which is this bill, this threat model bill. So weave, make everything lock in together, link them, and then map them to pen tests. So you have pen tests happening, and usually you get the same results. Well, because you're not feeding those pen testers enough knowledge. They don't know more. They can't know as much as an engineering know. But once you have this documentation built on you, you can give this to them and make them go an extra step further. What can I build on top of this threat model from a testing perspective? And this can feed as well into your requirements. So you create a threat model, and then your next requirements are fed from the threat model. At the end of the day, I want you to keep it simple, stupid. I'm using an engineering principle because I believe engineering principles have had a lot of fights. Start at the simple stage, and every stage you go to is going to be simple, because the people that started with you and are progressing with you, it's still simple to them. When you add the small bit, it's still simple. The more you go, the simple, not the simpler, but it is simple. You get what I mean? And then since I'm a gymmer, this is very important. You have to keep it lightweight. I'm not gonna say baby because it's not so good. But keep it lightweight. People want lightweight stuff. He's not pulling lightweight, but for him, it is lightweight. This is what I mean. Keep it stupid simple. For him, this is lightweight. For me, this is gonna be like 5 years from now. So keep your expectations. Let the iterations grow. Let the muscles grow bit by bit. No need to force it, because you'll injure yourself. And injury here means you lose buy-in. You lose the growth potential. And as engineers, I think I need to mention these bits. Learn to let go. As you see a security champion getting to a certain stage, when you see a threat model good enough, let it go. Let it do its own thing. And then delegate. At some point, these security champions are strong enough. You have to delegate to them when you can. You have to trust them. Someone might fire at me like, how dare you trust and not verify? This is the biggest thing we say in security. And then every other day we have a breach. So like, really, where's our verification at? So we can balance this. Of course, we should verify, especially when it's a newer security champion. But let's learn to trust and see if they fail. We all fail. We fail to educate them on this particular bit. How could we have done better as a collective? They're not separate from us. We need to make them belong to us. And now as a leader, this is going to be one slide. It might look simple, but it's not. Because leaders are the core essence for everything I've spoken about. If you don't have the support of a leader, you have to do everything I've mentioned in a smart way. You have to do it just on your own without bloating about it. And then suddenly you slowly start to get the fruits out of it. Because, for example, I received a security incident. I called in one of the security champion. That security champion made me fix that incident ultra fast. Without him, that would have taken me 2 days probably. So when I showcase that, then I start to get some feedback on, right, you didn't do anything with the security champion for leadership before, but you know that you have this bond with them. They helped you showcase it. So a leader's path is simple but crucial. So you need to identify key players. Who are the key players in your organization? Which departments should I talk to? Which engineering teams should I look at to get my business wins? Because not everyone is treated the same in an organization. Who are my business key players? I'm not saying go to talk to them immediately. I'm saying just see where the biggest pot gold is. Second is find people that want to build a relationship with you. So some people will have an inclination to security by design. They want to be doing security. Find them, go talk to them, get them on board, start with them. Then empower the business direction with a security vision. If security vision, again, doesn't align with business, if it doesn't feed into your business, if saying that your product is now more available, if it doesn't say that we are more secure than our competitor because X, Y, and Z, then you're missing out on something. And at the end, I want you to listen to your team and the teams you work with before you set your vision. So I'm saying in vision, but I want you to do it with your teams. Go talk to them. They have experienced the most. How can you build on what they have done so far? Listen to them and build from them. Don't build your own on your own. I mentioned metrics at some point. I'm just slightly touching on them. I'm not mentioning the exact metrics. I'm giving a grouping of them. First one of them is security champions growth. How are they growing? Is it healthy? Are we declining? Are we good? Are they growing themselves? So depending on each of these strategies, you want to look at what matters to me. Because in every organization, you're at a certain level. So talking about threat models influence, we can look at it. How many did AppSec build? How many did security champions build? How many did engineering actually build into? How many did these influence pen tests? Build this connection. Find what makes influence matter to you, and then mention that. Find the metrics that matter to you. Maybe it's about how many high risks you have in your threat models. Maybe it's the amount of risks you have. Doesn't matter to me. It matters to you. Find what matters to you. Vulnerabilities and risk trackers. Everyone talks about vulnerabilities and where the risk lays, and we're usually panicking because we're never covering enough. Features coverage, it's a simple one, but see how much you're covering in your organization. Maybe you have 5 teams that you're looking at, and then you have 50. Well, if you grow into 7, that's good. You're progressing, and this is what matters. These metrics need to grow and fund your future of what AppSec is doing. And then, of course, incidence counts and how fast you're remediating. Because the more security you have in your company, the more people know how security incidents happen. They know how to work with you. They know how to do things without having to explain a lot of things. Support scale. I think I'm not going to hide from this. Support is very important. And when you have 500 engineering teams and you're a group of 15 people, how do you support them? I'm not going to be the one answering. It's going to be the experts that you have in your own company, because you already have project managers, you already have tech leads, and you already have directors. As ICs, you need to talk to project managers and leaders. If you use Jira, go and talk to who organizes this. How can I integrate my tickets into your flow? How can I make it part of your team to look at this? How can I make this native? Is what I'm looking for. Make this native to whoever you're working with, because they will enable whatever you're working on. They will track it. They will help you track it. The more culture you build around this, the more tracking you have, the better it is. So for every company, it's going to be unique. You have to be flexible. Some things might work with a certain team, might not work with another. So talk to them, be flexible, accept that maybe what you propose at the start might be changed. It's fine, because they're the ones that need to work with you on it. It's in their basket. So see how you can fund into them. And then you build your own matrix. See, okay, they're using whatever they want. Some companies don't want to use trackers. They use documentation, or they directly go into issues, GitHub issues or whatever, and they go from there. Build slow. Do not force a lot of things. Again, do not push a lot. Just slowly. Start slowly. Don't create 7 tickets for everything. Create 1 ticket, see what you can add to it, see sub tickets. And then every team, however fast they grow, then you start adding. We need to add the tooling, we need to add the steps, we need to add did we actually cover everything by the end of it? And then team wins. Look at everything you do as a team. You're not separate, but we like to look at it separately, because this is how business looks at us. But our job here to enable this is to look at this together. Their problems are our problems. Our problems are not theirs yet, but this is where we aim to go. We want them to see our problems like they are their own. One important thing, this is the only avoid I say, avoid overhead of bureaucracy. Because at some point you have 1,700 tickets, a lot of things that are in the backlog that nobody cares about, nobody looks at, nobody follows up on. And this is bad. It looks bad for everyone, because, hey, you build this program, you marketed it to us, and you sold it to us, but you're not following on it. You're not really following on it. So it looks bad on you. So to end this on a Thursday evening, what takeaways am I going to tell you here to take? Because I've spoken a lot. Mostly, I want you to find your way. And this way is going to be in 6 bullet points. Strategic targets. Strategy will give you purpose, a destination. This is where you're heading. If you don't have that, then go back to the start. See where you are heading. Figure out where business is heading. Figure out where you are heading as well. Track the work you do. Tracking will help you stay accountable to your own work with yourself and with engineering and with SMEs and with business and everything. Showcase the need. Once you do the tracking, once you have the metrics, once you see all of that, you can showcase what will fund into your strategy that you set. So don't look really high up the moon. Just look in front of you. This is my first target. When you're getting there, you're gonna get more wins, then push harder. So it's gonna showcase why you need more money or resources or whatever you want to call it. Mentor the curiosity. I think this is the most important bit from an engineering perspective. Making sure that when someone comes to you, you actually give them from your heart. You let them know that you care about them. You let them know this is where you can grow. This is how you can go. I know you chose to be an individual contributor, but I'm pretty sure you can speak an engineer to an engineer and actually see, right, I know way too much about about security. I can give them a bit about it. I can tell them how it will grow their experience, how they can build a better product, how they can become senior or staff or architects because of this skill. Because if you don't have it, I don't think people will look up to you. When people find a lot of vulnerabilities in your code, it's not going to be a good sign. Make sure it's iterative growth. Engineering showed us agile works but a lot of things have juiced this out and made it into marketing. So agile now is not the agile I'm talking about. I'm talking about iterative growth. Go slow, take iterations, and get where you need step by step. And then at the end, keep it lightweight. I'm not talking about Ronnie, but keep it lightweight because this will allow change to happen. People are going to be reluctant to you. They don't know you. They don't know your map, your destination, or whatever. We have our product. If you keep it lightweight for them, if you keep it engaging, they will join you slowly, steadily. And at the end, I want you to have fun and lift heavy. Okay, fine. Have fun and weave the bonds, the relationships you're doing, and get somewhere where you want to be. Uh, you can lift heavy too. Doesn't hurt to lift. Right. Thank you.
Yeah, we did overrun a little bit, but we've got time for a couple of questions if there are anyone who'd like to ask them.
We also have a working microphone now.
Which apparently does not need to be used.
Ah, there we go. You can throw, but I can't throw. You might be able to.
Hey,
Yeah.
thanks for the presentation and great insights. Do you have any recommendations for tooling unification? Because both speakers today showed a picture that is at least scary on the security tooling landscape. How do we bring all of this together?
Security tooling is having a slight growth now. People are looking at CI/CD pipelines. I'm not going to mention tools right now because we're not marketing for anything specific. But some tools are trying to take several things into one to build it into a single glass of pane. Is that your question? Is that where you're heading towards? Having that pane where it merges from all of the tools into one? Or are we talking about something different?
No, that's exactly like ASOC, ASPM, CSPM.
Yeah. No, I mentioned the SPM slightly on one of the slides, but going deep into it right now like takes a whole lot of time than I already have.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Thanks.
Yeah. Cheers.
Any other questions? I think that's it. In which case, thank you all. Well,
Thank you.
Last round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you again, all the people who joined on the stream, and we will see you next time.
And don't forget to join the Catch the Flag next week if you're interested. It's on the
Thank you again.
Thank you.